Today, let's make some furry square slippers. I'm making a pair to fit size 6.5 feet here. This pattern is part of the knit weaving extravaganza that will appear sometime in 2021 in Country Knitting of Maine News and Views, and there it appears in many sizes. We'll use a very simple knit weaving pattern. I'm going to show you in this video how to do it manually. The pattern does include using a punch card to do it if you have a machine that will do so. I'm showing you on a bulky. It will also work on a mid-gauge because we're using Mary Lou's Liberty yarn, which is on the very light end of number 4. Similar yarns are Tam Nordic and Karen's Simply Soft if you need to substitute. Make this either on your bulky at about stitch size 3 or on your mid-gauge at about stitch size 6. I actually made the pair on 2 different machines to prove that it works. We're working on the ladies 6, so cast on by chaining around the needle shanks 32 stitches. At the beginning of the cast on yarn, leave a 12-inch yarn tail. Knit 2 main yarn rows before beginning the weaving pattern. Use Lion Brand Fun Fur or some very similar yarn to do the weaving with. Bring all the needles forward, weave over one, under one, over one, under one, across. Very simple, and don't pull overly tightly. Use a relaxed hand. While I'm weaving, let me add a little bit of information. This comes in child sizes from 5 to 2 and ladies sizes 5 to 16, which corresponds to male sizes in shoes 3 to 14. So we've covered a lot of size ground. I purposely did not include infant sizes because these yarns tend to shed a little bit and I was concerned about choking hazard. Every weaving row is the same, over and under the needles, then knit across with the main yarn. If you can manage it, go over the needles you went under last time and under the needles you went over. It's not critical because it doesn't show very much, but it is ideal. For the ladies size 6, do this for 51 rows. If your carriage will knit back from hold, the best way to do this is to allow the carriage to do that so that you can work with the needles all the way extended. If it will not knit back from hold, as in a very simple or very old machine, that's okay. Still pull the needles all the way forward, weave over and under, and then push them back to upper working position to knit. Let's discuss gauge for a moment. Knit weaving substantially changes the gauge. If you're an experienced knitter, you will be aware that the yarn we're using as the base yarn would normally get more like 5 stitches per inch rather than 4. But in a weaving pattern, the fabric gets altered by adding the second yarn. So that's where we get 4 stitches, 6 rows per inch. When all 51, or whatever your number for your size is, weaving rows are complete, snip the weaving yarn, leaving a little bit of a tail. Transfer every other stitch to the next needle over and put those empty needles out of work. If you end up with 2 needles side by side at the end of the work, take the outer one, the stitch from the outer one, and move it to the inner one and place that empty out of work. Knit 1 more row with the main yarn, then snip it, leaving a long enough tail to use to both gather off the toe and seam the top of the slipper. That's maybe 20 inches or so is necessary. Then thread that yarn tail into a yarn needle, pick up every stitch in order, and take them off of the machine in that manner. Either side of this fabric may be used as the right side of the slipper. The fuzzier side will definitely be the purl side, and that's what I used. Whichever side you decide on, you can enhance its fuzziness if you want to, and I do want to, by fluffing it out, either combing it with a comb, a brush that you might use on a wig, a vegetable brush works, or just finger plucking. But those hairs from the eyelash yarn are caught in the stitches, and they can be released and make much more of a halo of fur. Gather in the toe, that's the cast off end, securely, and then use the same yarn to continue seaming the edges of the work together about halfway down the length of the knitting. The farther you seam, the better the slipper will stay on. On the other hand, there has to be room to insert your foot into it and for your ankle to sit there. So it's a judgment call exactly how tight you want it. It may depend on who's wearing it and whether they wear socks. Where the seam ends, reinforce it by stitching that same area a couple of times. Then knot the yarn and weave in the tail. Now thread the yarn tail from the very beginning that we left into the yarn needle. Fold the fuzzy fabric so that the cast on is in two halves with the center of the work, the center of the fabric on the fold, and seam the cast on edges together. This will sit at the back of the foot, up the back of the heel, making this rectangle actually into a foot-shaped something. For both seams, keep in mind which side of the fabric you're going to use as the right side and conceal the seam as best you can. This is not difficult because the fur hides pretty much. I think it's easiest to seam with the fabric inside out and then turn the slipper right side out when you're finished. Here's the second slipper being created on my KX350, a mid-gauge machine. I can't tell the two slippers apart and don't know which is which now that I've looked away. But I did find that the mid-gauge fabric needed more fluffing out to release the hairs and look like the other fabric, probably just because of the difference between the machines and the needle spacing. But the gauge was matchable and the fabric was matchable. These are so easy, you'll be able to knit slippers for absolutely everyone you know.